Good evening. Welcome to the April News Charter School Board of Directors meeting. Hope everybody is well. I'd like to call the meeting to order and remind everyone of our ethics statement. Board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. There being none, but if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Please review the agenda. And I'll do a quorum for all vote. Entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The agenda has been accepted for the April meeting. We have no public comments on our sign-up sheet. Want to say anything, Terry? I'm just putting you on the spot. Okay, so we'll move to the approval. I'm going to have to laugh tonight to keep myself awake. Approval of the minutes from our March meeting. Take a moment to review and I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is passed for approval of the March minutes. I see Mr. Lynch is not present. If anybody want to give us an update from the Athletic Booster Club?
There's a full update, but just I do know a couple of statuses, is that they are in the middle of taking nominations for their next year officer positions. They were supposed to meet tonight, but some come up and they're having to reschedule that. So if anybody's interested in serving as one of the officer positions, they are taking nominations for that currently. Also, they just had the Mudcats event. That was one of, actually I'm sorry, that's an athletics fundraiser, but the Booster Club is currently doing their Boston Butts. They sold all they'll be cooking them on just Thursday, which is a couple of days. So I think we ordered a couple extra if anybody didn't get to order in. So they're doing that with Booster Club this Thursday. That's what I know, right? I just happen to know those folks.
I just want to commend Richard. I don't think parents fully understand what he does in regards to the lunch and being responsible for that. It's just unbelievable, the task. And so I just want to commend him. I've said that before, but I just want to make sure I say it every time I see a post on Facebook, can somebody go by Popeye's chicken and pick up the, it's just, it's unbelievable. So just thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And it's good to see you. And as always, you're so lovely and gracious in reminding us to be grateful for everyone that we work with. And we appreciate it.
If I may, and just for the public record, as many of y'all know, I've rendered my resignation, and you will not be getting rid of me, but I just feel that after working here at News Charter School on this board for 15 going on 16 years, it's time. And I am still committed and will always be committed to this school. And when I pass away, my whatever you call it, not epitaph, but obituary, it better have something about News Charter School. I'm not planning on going away anywhere new soon, but I'm just saying.
Thank you so much. Tara?
Okay, sorry guys. So last meeting, Ms. Emily Knowles stepped in for me to let you guys know that we were looking to start a new project. We were hoping that our senior class can paint some ceiling tiles for a new starter, and then we're going to try and make it a tradition, and following senior classes we'll start to decorate the ceiling tiles we have here in our building. We recently got approval on that, so we're going to try and kick that into motion. I'm working with Ms. Lexi Black. She's our NHS president, and we're going to hopefully meet on a Saturday and get all of our seniors together and try to start that here at New Charter.
Have you guys already?
Gone on your leadership trip?
Yeah, that was back in February. Are you talking about the leadership retreat?
The leadership retreat?
Yeah, we all went back in February.
And so I'm imagining you all took lots of pictures, and I don't know if they've been in any of the videos, but I'd really love to see some
I know
videos.
Miss Westergaard has tons of pictures, and
Okay.
Miss Bruner as well. I think we
Okay.
have a couple videos
Okay,
as well.
that would be great. I can't be there with you, but I'd like to share a little bit of what you've done.
And Tara, I'm not one to say we need to start defacing public property or school property, but as a follow-up to your ceiling tile idea, the purpose of those rocks were to really start to kind of get kids to be, whether it was a fundraising for birthdays, or I challenged the seniors to one night kind of come out here and paint it.
And vandalism.
That rocks cannot, and they'll chip away at it, but you're more than welcome to paint it, whatever. Yeah, that was the intent, and that was the spirit of what those rocks were for, is to something that classes can take ownership on it. And obviously, when I grew up many years ago, I climbed a water tower, and that was the tradition the seniors did. So thank God we don't have a water tower, but we do have rocks. So.
What are those rocks called? I put this in minutes so they don't get in trouble.
Spirit rocks.
Spirit rocks, yeah, there you go, thank you.
It's not technically vandalism if we let you do it.
Yeah, and yeah.
And when I'm here tomorrow, you can see your rocks. Thank you.
Okay, our director's report.
She's not kidding.
We have the tricky mic tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to give you an update. We currently have 959 students on the books for next school year, with our wait list well over 300. So we will continue to use that wait list as needed as we find out people have moved away or changed their mind on a seat. But we've had very few turndowns this year, which is good news. In addition, for staffing, I did inaccurately report that we have a total of 91. I have been forgetting to add in that the state special reserve funded position. We actually have 92 permanent positions this year, or full-time positions, excuse me. And we still have our one vacancy, but we do have a substitute that's helping us out as we are posting and looking for applications. We've already received, I believe, 6 applications for the position of Senior Academy Counselor. And so we'll give you updates on that as we move forward. As far as our celebration schedule, tonight was our last celebration of the year, and we also incorporated a volunteer recognition. So we did have a handful of our volunteers show up at 5 o'clock for some cupcakes and some goodies, just to say thank you for all that they do here on campus. We want to try to make that an annual event and make it bigger and bigger each year. We only, like I said, had a handful of our volunteers show up, but we'll try to find different times to be able to make sure that they know that it's a way to celebrate and recognize them. In addition, we recognized our core values of teamwork, compassion, and perseverance. At 5:30 this evening, our own Tara LePage was a recipient of the Perseverance Award for the Senior Academy. And so again, it's just always a wonderful opportunity. I encourage you, when you can, to join us for those celebrations. It's great to see how excited the students are and how proud the parents are, especially knowing that they're not just recognizing their homeroom group, but they're actually recognizing a span of grades and being selected as the one who best represents that core value amongst well over 200 students in most cases. As far as our strategic plan goes, the update on that will come at the May meeting. We've been talking through some issues with the academic committee. Finance has been talking about some operational items, so we'll be bringing you a more formal update at the May meeting. And as far as the remainder of my report, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Smith as he gives us our third and final academy level report based on academics and what we've been doing this year with benchmark data. His is perhaps the most confusing. because in the senior academy, as a reminder, our classes are on the block schedule. So you'll have data from the fall semester that's discrete and individual from the data from the spring semester, where all of the previous presentations have been continuous data because the student groups stay in those classes throughout the entire year. So what he's going to be talking to you about is lessons learned from the fall semester, what we're trying to learn in the spring semester, but our spring semester is essentially only halfway through. So just a difference there. He has provided for you a data sheet that he'll draw your attention to. So that's the single handout that was laid at your table. And again, we have some more confusing information because we did start changing the way that we do our benchmarks from summaries to comprehensive. So again, not an exact apples to apples comparison with the data points. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith. And I believe he has a presentation on the screen for you as well.
Good afternoon. I do have a presentation behind you, and we'll start with that. I'm not going to read that to you, so I do know that. One of the questions that came up was what was different from last year. This year we were using the MTSS, which is the multi-tier system of support, to help focus on students and what was keeping them from growing and how we addressing those needs. We met every other week by grade level to talk about how to improve student achievement, address student needs and behaviors. We spoke about MTSS and how it involved looking at all support systems. We utilized Cougar Time to help remediate those students, and we had staff meetings that were organized each month by a focus such as goals, data, PLCs, progress report, EVOS, and even our NESIS evaluation tool. We have extensive professional development this year to help our teachers grow both professionally and personally. So then, what is on the horizon? We are working with the intermediate to offer additional classes in the 8th grade. We are providing training for teachers in PADEA. We are continuing to offer student CCP, the IVC program, and the NCVPS program as elective options. We are joining other academies on the positive behavioral supports and planned academic celebrations. So what is our direction? We are going to continue emphasizing writing along with the other academies. We are going to continue personalizing learning through class options and differentiation. We are going to increase in-house offerings in the next 2 years and strengthen support for struggling students in academics and behavioral avenues such as PBIS. We are going to repurpose Cougar Time again to give the teachers more class time. We're committed to professional development for our teachers to ensure the best instructions is being delivered to our students. Now I want you to turn your attention to the sheet that Ms. Pulliam referenced just a second ago, and we're going to talk a little bit about our benchmarks. Our EOC results from the fall and projected spring are going to be about the same. We did have some growth from benchmark 3 and 4 as the students tested a little lower coming in on at benchmark 3 than they did in benchmark 1. We experimented with moving to a summary test for the benchmark 2 to see how the students would do on covered material that they actually already covered in the class, but realized that the data was not consistent and reverted back to the comprehensive for benchmark 3 and benchmark 4. The comprehensive will be what we are using moving forward for all benchmarking, as it gives us a better understanding of how they would do if given the EOC at that moment on all objectives in one test. That's our report on benchmarking. Any questions?
What is a summary benchmark?
Summaries basically are different tests that we are given to help try to find out did everything that's been covered, are they doing a good job on that coverage? Comprehensive is basically I'm giving all the objectives all the way across and saying at this moment, if I gave the test, would they be able to do well on that test? So they have all the objectives as opposed to a summary, which would only be just a certain objectives that's already been covered by the teacher.
So benchmark 1 is, what's the time frame? When does that hit? When do you do benchmark 1?
So we do, I'm not quite, I don't want to say I know the number on that, but I know we do 2 in the first semester and 2 in the second semester.
They're around the progress report time period. That way they can have the information leading
Right.
into the end of the first quarter and leading into the final exam for the course.
So benchmark 1 would be around October,
So it'd be September.
and then benchmark 4
Would be in either late October or early November, depending on where that 6-week mark falls.
benchmark 4.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Benchmark 4 has
Just
just
happened
happened
last
about a
week.
week or 2 ago. Yeah, that was last week.
Last week.
And so your explanation of the differences or lack of differences between benchmark 1 and benchmark 4 is what?
Ask that question one more time so I can understand what you're.
Well, you said 1 is in the fall and by 4 is in,
Remember, 1 and 2 are for the semester
For
course, and
semester.
then in December, that course is finished and they're enrolling in new courses. So 3 and 4 are basically 1 and 2 for the spring semester.
So, no, yeah, and you would also
They're different
have.
students, yes, different students, different
students,
sections.
Different semester.
so, and there are 2 major gateway courses, language arts and math, or especially math, not really too much change, growth.
We had more growth and basically by looking at the benchmark 3 and benchmark 4, you can see the growth that's happening there. They did come in a slot, like I said, in benchmark 3, they came in a little bit low, more so than the first compared to the second. But like I said, you can't compare those 2 because it's 2 different kind of tests.
As far as Math 1 goes, though, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when we looked at the data, we saw progress in different objectives, so that the flat performance was actually indicative of non-retention of earlier material. So that gives the teacher what they need to help the students go back and reframe what they lost from earlier in the semester. The majority of the students in Math 1 in the second semester are students who were in a partnered class, so they actually took foundations of math in the fall. So these are the students who struggle the most with math for us at the high school level. So we are using that data very comprehensively to do targeted interventions, and the Math 1 teacher is excellent at that. But we're learning a lot. This is data that they've never had before that's helping reframe how the course is delivered.
Yeah, so I'm just curious to understand as we think towards next year around, this is kind of our first year doing formal assessments, right? So just so I understand, so we did a benchmark 1 in the fall about the end of the first 9 weeks? 6 weeks? A progress report. And then we didn't do a benchmark 2 before the end of the semester, right? This is not active.
No, we did a benchmark before the report card went out, before the semester ended.
Those were just summary benchmarks instead of comprehensive benchmarks,
Correct,
and
yep.
so it wasn't an apples-to-apples comparison. When you're looking at Math 1, also something to think about, the students who took Math 1 in the fall are students who could take it as an isolated standalone course, and the students who are taking it in the spring most likely were taking it with the partner class of Foundations of Math so that they could have math for the full year. So they are different levels of math students as well.
And then, no, and I'm trying to get maybe in the future it would help if we just have a visual representation of the timing of the benchmark so that we just mentally understand, like, you know, hey, it's at the middle of the semester. And
Because I believe that same request came up in the other presentations, that to be able to have almost a map of when they're given. So yes, we'll be
so
happy
then
to create
benchmark
that.
3 was done when, like, roughly like 6 weeks into the spring semester. And then this benchmark 4, we just did to hopefully give us some anticipated insights as we do the last push for in the course testing, right?
What, can we have like this in relation to grades, a grade distribution? Because while all that's good and that all gets fed into the EOC, at the end of the day for high school students is your transcript and your grades.
Absolutely.
And ACTs and SATs, not necessarily, schools are not looking at anybody's EOC. So actual grade distribution, especially to compare that against the performance on a benchmark, I think would be helpful.
Not a problem.
I mean, that's always something I've just kind of had a intriguing question about. So when we talk about grades in their classrooms, right? I mean, depending on how it's administered and they could have all A's in the class, but didn't show a 45% on an assessment, right?
And from a validation standpoint, that shouldn't happen.
Standardized test well, where they were nervous, or their
Right.
stomach hurt that day, or all, a number of.
Or to come to the class and evaluation of it. Yeah.
Or.
There's a lot of different things that they can share with us.
We, again, singularly seem to just focus on EOCs and EOGs, like that is the definition of the performance of our children, and it's not. And so we don't see a lot of the other stuff that gives us a complete picture of how our student is doing, and that's always challenging to me, because, you know, they should walk away just thinking this one test on this one day represents everything they know and can do.
And that's part of another push for why we wanted to come up with that formal assessment plan that we still owe to the board, so that we can have other items that we can pull into the portfolios to show the overall performance of our cohorts in different assessment patterns. In addition to class grades, we'll have specific assignments, writing assignments, etc.
But don't piecemeal it, put it
Right.
together in a
Exactly.
complete narrative,
Yes.
so that it begins to tell a story about the performance at the school. Because we tend to just get data, just seems to be one type of data.
I did have one question about, you said that, this is the first time that you've had this data, and it's, it's valuable data. So what, in looking at like the Math 1, in between the third and the fourth benchmark, so what is the strategy? You see there's zero growth there. So what is the strategy, or what are you all doing with this data to improve this
If
for
I
next
think we
year?
were done, Mr. Smith.
Sorry, I thought you had another slide.
No, no.
Okay, we'll come on up because they've got more questions. Can you share some examples of how the teachers are using this data, particularly looking, let's say by way of example, the Math 1 data where it's flat, how the teacher is using this information to make adjustments or seek training or change materials or offer different strategies for instruction?
So we've got, with Math 1 especially, and that kind of class, you've got teachers who are going beyond. So in other words, they're meeting the students after school, they're meeting them even on the weekends. I can tell you a couple times where they've met with Bojangles. I love Bojangles. But they do those kinds of things so that they make sure that they're able to address the needs of the kid, and then be able to see results that comes from the EOCs or from the next benchmark. So in the benchmarks, what you're trying to do is look at your first compared to your second to see, are we progressing in the right direction? Is there something I need to go back and reteach? And our teachers are doing that. They're doing it also when they come to us at MTSS meetings and say, where are we at, as far as making sure that everybody's progressing in the right direction. And they get the chance to talk to me about those kind of things and how we can make strategies that is going to be able to address those needs.
But is there a strategy holistically going for, not for these children now, but for next year, when we see that we haven't had any growth for Math 1 between 3 and 4, to teach the course differently, or that's kind of where I was.
They always go back and reteach it in a different way. If they see if it's something that's majority. In other words, for example, if they're looking at the class and say everybody's missing fractions, for example, then they'd go back and reteach fractions in a different type of way.
It's also part of what Dr. Sportslater alluded to in one of her presentations. It's kind of the summer work that we'll do when we get the vertical team together. With the Math 1 situation, it'd be great to get hands on the 7th and 8th grade teachers to figure out what they know about the students or what they know about the curriculum that they've been taught or not been exposed to. One thing that we learned through one of our vertical alignments by way of example is that a lot of the material, let's say in 1 grade, is actually pretty much retaught at the next grade level from a standards perspective. So if a student really gets it well in the 1 grade, they're going to really kill it, do awesome on it in the 2nd year. But if we don't start adding in some of the new material that they haven't been exposed to, then when they hit that next level, it's all brand new material. And so we can start working with the teachers to start putting some looping in. We've realized that between 6th and 7th, there's a lot of overlap. So we're starting to add more 8th grade facts into 7th grade. But we're also looking at compacting so that we can get some of our students in the appropriate level math classes so they're not waiting till the 9th grade to be exposed to Math 1 concepts, which is a challenge in and of itself. As you know, if we wait till 9th grade to introduce you to Math 1 and algebraic concepts, we're putting you behind the 8 ball to begin with, compared to all of your peers. So those are some of the things that we're doing. But the other thing is going to be really just ripping the course apart and looking at every single objective and taking all of the benchmark data and figuring out, are the instructional strategies that we're using actually aligned to where the deficiencies are for the student. One thing that we've talked about a lot internally is if our teachers truly understand what it means to differentiate. They certainly know to teach it one way, to teach it another way, to teach it another way. That in and of itself isn't the true authentic definition of differentiation. It might be that we need to try different presentation strategies. We actually had an amazing strategy by one of our EC teachers where to teach surface area. They tinfoiled Dr. Swartzlander's office. They had to calculate how much tinfoil they would need by calculating the surface area of her desk and her table, and so that got them engaged in a different way that finally made sense to them. So that's part of what we have to tear apart this summer, because clearly we're missing something here.
So these benchmarks, just so I'm clear, these are not built by the teachers specifically for the content they're teaching. These benchmarks are to assess against a standard.
Correct.
Because
we tried that first approach and we realized it wasn't giving us very meaningful data. It was just letting us know my unit tests and my benchmark tests have alignment. Yay! It didn't help us see which students were forecasted to do really well in future topics or which students didn't need to be taught. You can always learn that, oh wait, they're coming in with a lot of background knowledge, so we don't have to spend a lot of time teaching them something they already know, and we can start advancing on the more difficult concepts. In this case though, we've got a group of learners that are struggling to master the content, and we've got a lot of work to do to figure out why they're struggling so much.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we prevent the scenario where the fox guards the hen house when the person
Correct.
who's teaching the material makes the assessment to support the level they're teaching, not that, hey, it really should be an independent set of assessments that are against the standards which the suitors are assessed against. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, what does future focus documenting the past mean?
Say it one time. I can't read it.
What is your first strategic framework? Future focus documenting the past.
So we're basically setting up a system in place so that we can say basically what you were asking just a moment ago, where we can look back and say, this is where we were, this is where we're trying to go. So there's basically, for the next 5 years, I've got a Google slide, if you will, that's going to hold all my data. That's going to actually have all the benchmarks inside of it. It's also going to be able to show where the EOCs were and be able to see where we came from and where we are and how did we get there.
I think this ties back to the discussion, I think it was the last academic affairs meeting, not this one, where we talked about what are we going to do as part of our strategic plan for our data analysis strategy across the school, across the grades, across the academies. I don't think sticking something in a Google Doc is an effective analytical strategy for data. So in our strategic plan, when we talk about like the technology enablers or the support strategy, I think that's something we need to really spend a little bit of time having a strategy around, because a bunch of these random pockets of data that are non-correlated and you can't draw interdependencies and all that stuff, what you end up with is just a bunch of data and nobody can do anything with it. So.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just a few reminders before I close out my report. Early release is this Friday, so Thursday. So just as a reminder, we'll do early release schedule this Thursday. We will have our holiday/spring break closure Friday the 19th through Friday the 26th, with classes resuming on Monday, April 29th. As a reminder to our board members and anybody that's watching the video at home, exams do begin the week of May 6th. I can't iterate this enough. As a campus that's K-12, although we do try to have our different academies located at different portions of the campus, we do have end of grade exams for grades 3 through 8 beginning as early as May 6th. We have our AP exams for our students in the senior academy taking the advanced placement courses that begin as early as May 6th. I'm looking at Tara, I think that's true, yes, depending on the course. And then the end of course exams, which are those for the high school students or senior academy students in the English 2, Math 1, Math 3, and biology courses this semester. Those exams will be that very last week of school. So Come May 6th, if you've got time, come on by, volunteer, proctor, bring chocolate, whatever it is that you could do, because most of our students and our staff will be in their serious mode, making sure that the students have the opportunity to do their best. As much as we all would love to eliminate these exams, they're a part of our life, and then the students take them seriously, and we want to help them do their best and feel successful.
What was the date again? I'm sorry.
For the exams, they begin May 6th and will run all the way through May 16th in terms of opportunities to proctor and volunteer. Ms. Cummings, our counselor, Ms. Cummings, S. Cummings at newscharterschool.org is coordinating all of the volunteers for that. So if you have a half day or a day that you can give us, please reach out to her or know someone in the community that can.
May 13th.
May 6th through the 16th. Then May 17th is our last day of school, and that will be an early release and graduation or commencement ceremony. We will have your tickets waiting for you here at the office. I think Ms. Heifel hangs on to those for you until such a time as you're ready to pick them up. We will have the front row reserved for our board members, so please let us know if you're unable to attend so we can give those seats to other participants in the ceremony. And we will be commencing promptly at 6 p.m. I'm looking to Tara because I know you've been told this. We commence promptly at 6, meaning we close and lock the doors so that the ceremony doesn't get interrupted. So please, please, please get here by 5:30 to make sure you're here by 5:45. So please, please join us. Staff will be encouraged to wear their regalia. If you would like to wear your regalia, you are more than welcome to do so, or you can wear just your fancy clothes. So please join us, and we'll be reaching out with specific invitations for your calendar if you don't already have them, just to continue to encourage you.
There's nobody that's.
No, I said you have them, yeah.
I do.
You'll be on the stage to help recognize the graduates, but unless you desire to say remarks, we don't have to have you. Okay, all right. And so that'll round out our school year. So therefore, the next board meeting that we have will be after school is out. So when we have that meeting, hopefully our minds will be a little fresher and we'll be able to have good dialogue about our strategic plan. Thank you.
Ms. Pulliam, I just wanted to ask a question about, I'm sorry, Ms. Pulliam, I want to ask you a question about the days following the lottery. So when names are selected for the lottery, then we call them during the next, 2-3 days or something like that? And then they have 24 hours to either accept or reject that? Is that how that goes?
They have 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Was there do you have an idea of what the number of people who may have been selected in the lottery but then declined the placement?
I actually went over that list with Ms. McFall today. There were, on the kindergarten list, I think there were 2. I think third grade there were 2, but other than that, it was either 1 or
Just a
none.
couple. Okay. I just honestly was
We were very excited about
just
that.
sort of wondering if people are wanting to come here first or if they're just using this as one of several options.
Well, it's interesting. We've had several conversations with different family members about their choices for coming, because as you know, we've been starting to really invest in some new to news opportunities and some open house opportunities. So we had a special session for all of those families that were enrolled through the lottery to come join us and learn more information about the school. And during that session, we had several that approached us afterward and said, this is our first choice, and we're so super glad we got in. But they're concerned because they've got other siblings maybe that didn't get in on the off grades, but they're willing to make that difference happen because they want to make sure the other siblings can join them here.
Well,
So that aspiration is still in the community, and that was really lovely to hear.
If you can only think of 4 out of everybody that we placed, then that's exceptionally good news. Thank you.
Mr. Lloyd, 2 of the ones that declined their seats did have siblings also in the lottery that were so far down on the wait list that they just pulled them out because the
Not
other
willing to
sibling-
wait the year.
Right. So it wasn't a us, it was a wait list issue.
That's good.
Thank you. We'll now have committee reports. We do not have an executive committee report. So we'll move to our standing committees and finance.
So in the spirit of being ahead of the 8 ball, we, in the spirit of operational excellence, we have updated the way we run our finance committee. So in your board package, you will have in advance of all meetings, the finance committee notes, and we've actually added a section in the meeting notes about decisions made. So you can kind of use that as a quick reference when you look at the notes, because as you can see, it's about 2.5 pages worth of notes because we had a lot of discussion about this. So I'll just highlight it really quickly for you. So there were a couple of things discussed around decisions. One of them is, 1A is that we have been putting off a lot of the stuff around maintenance of the facilities, and as we know, facilities is a subcommittee of the finance. And so what we've done is asked Josh, as we kind of got towards the end of the year, kind of looking at our financial surplus, and we had a better line of sight to where we will end the fiscal year financially, is to put together kind of a priority list of things that we wanted to get done on the school campus that honestly we had just been punting, throughout the year. And so he presented a priority and a non-priority item. The total priority come in just over like $28,000. It was everything from putting buffers around the mulch because we're going to put new mulch in there, but the faster we put mulch in, the rain washes it away. That kind of list of priority items. That came to a total of $28,000. So the recommendation the Finance Committee is making is that we would approve an increase of the facilities line item by $30,000 to go ahead and start to get all that work lined up for the summer. Because he's gone through and got all the contracted process stuff, but you need to start getting the work scheduled. And so in the actual overall budget, we're still on track to end the year at about $198,000 in surplus. So that 30 would come off of the 198. So
is that 30 to cover the remainder of this fiscal year, or is that an increase going forward?
So that's a good point, Jimmy. So currently it's just for this fiscal year. It will come out of this fiscal year's expenditures. However, we are going to have discussion as part of our next year's budget setting is we should look at the things that are priority items and say, are they recurring expenses? And if that requires an increase in the facilities line item in next year's budget, we should make sure that it accounts for that. Asking that of Josh, a good portion of those items were just one-time expenditures. They were not recurring ones. So, but yes, we will look as budget setting for next year whether or not that facilities line item is sufficient for next year.
So increasing by 30 makes the total for the fiscal year. I'm sorry.
No, I should let that up. Right now,
The current line item for facilities has about $60,000 for repairs and maintenance with another $40,000 in reserve. We've spent a good portion of that reserve with the new construction and outfitting that building. So it would take that $40,000 reserve and make it closer to a $70,000 reserve. Also, just as a friendly reminder, the $86,000 that was approved for the salary increase has not been withdrawn from the surplus because we'll do a single budget update at the May meeting with all of the approvals, so that with this, it would bring your total to closer to about an $82,000 surplus projected with no other adjustments.
So that's the recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve that $30,000 change in the budget so that they can actually reflect it next budget and go ahead and get the work started for the summer. That would take a motion.
I make that as a motion.
But we're going to try to do this before the end of the year, so all the invoices and
That's right.
everything.
Well, actually, we do accrual accounting, which goes for like 60 to 90 days, like through the summer.
Okay, that's fine.
If it's booked and contracted, it actually hits the year's budget.
Right.
Roger, can you clarify that?
The motion is to increase the facilities line item budget by $30,000 to cover the facilities expenditures for this fiscal year.
Is that as a motion?
That's the recommendation.
That's the recommendation. Are you going to do that as a motion? I'll second, or I can make the motion.
I prefer
I
somebody.
make a motion to approve the line item increase to 30,000.
Second.
Mr. Speaker, it's about 30,000, not 230.
About 30.
About 30.
So we want to do, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. If I wanted to know if someone had a proposal for an expenditure, they submit that how to.
Okay, so Hold on one second. That is something that came out of some of these discussions. So, and then as part of that facilities plan, there was a discussion about like getting more of a long-term view of like the big things, like our HVAC systems, so that we started to build in budget preparation for those, because I don't have those numbers, but it can be close to $250,000 if you started having to replace like HVAC systems. So the action item we took there was Robbie is going to work with Josh to come in the next board meeting or two about more of a 3 to 5 year plan so that we can build some of those expenditures. We have the reserves in cash, sitting in the bank that we could cover a lot of that, but we want to build it into our budget so that we don't just come up and have to deplete a bunch of our cash reserves. So that's an action item that Robbie took with Josh that we were reporting out as they kind of bake out that 3 to 5 year plan. The other discussion we had was around, this is just more of an FYI for the board, is around the extra duty pay structure and what was fiscally affordable within the budget and as it looking towards next year. I think Ms. William is still working through that. Should probably have that ready by the next board meeting to actually come up with a formal proposal of extra duty pay and how much financially that would factor into next year's budget. And there was a request, we tabled this when there was a discussion that was brought forward from Bradford Technology about Go Guardian for administration. It's basically a software package that allows teachers a little bit more control over what websites students are using in a BYOD scenario, like what websites can they go to, et cetera. So there was an ask around that, but the discussion came that we weren't comfortable with bringing that recommendation forward until we had a little bit more holistic plan around what are we needing for our strategy for next year. Because if you start onesie-twosie it now and then we come up through the strategic plan with our budget setting at the end of May and June, we could have already committed $1. So we tabled that for right now as part of the larger strategic planning process. And that's where, Ms. Dixon, that's where we had the discussion. I had a little bit of an aha moment with a number of meetings last week, is how we do our budget planning and our allocation of dollars to resources is a little bit out of sync. We've got to tighten this up from an operations perspective. So if a teacher or somebody needs something for a classroom, they have a process by which the academy leader has to sign off on it. It comes to the front office to look within our current line item budget. If we don't have current dollars appropriated for the activity, it goes back to the academy leader, and then they have to basically do a negotiation process with Susan, Ms. Boyum, as an ED of, are there going to be trade-offs made or et cetera. Kind of one of the aha moments for me was like, well, wait a minute, what's the backlog of things that have not been affordable? Because there's only so much budget, right? And I don't know that we've had a good process of saying, what is the backlog of things that if we have the money, we would spend it on. And it's a priority and it's aligned to the strategy. So that's something they took back from an operational procedure perspective that they're going to work on so that we understand what are the outstanding asks that if we had resources for this. Because what's happened is between that and the Resource Development Committee this year, what I've learned is that people are doing a lot of things with the best of intents. Like if there's not money, then they want to go off and fundraise or they go off and write grants. And it's kind of, and without that ungoverned or unguided, it's turned into, we've got 40 fundraisers. People are saying, well, there's a need, and everybody says we should have it, but there's no money, so I'm going to try to get it. So it's caused a bit of a chaotic scenario. So we're going to kind of work on that in resource development in partnership with the strategic plan and the priorities list to say, as we go into next year, here's the plan of everything that's going to need money for next year. And then we're going to map into that a resource development plan that we think we can close the gap, where here's the 5 top items that we need for the institution. If we can go raise the money for it, it would go towards those items. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, it's
At the staff level, if a staff member has a request, they'll usually start by taking it to their academy leader or bring it straight to me, and then we talk through whether or not it's something that's already affordable within the budget because it's a budgeted item. For example, I needed a new couple of novels because my novel set is short about 3 books. well, we've already got instructional supply budget for that grade level to cover those costs, and if it hasn't been expended, then we can approve it. But if they're asking for a new expenditure, it's something what I would refer to in a more professional manner of a business case for adjusting the budget to put in a new line item or to expand an existing line item. That's a process that we need to formalize.
Well, I was really thinking specifically of the info screens that I've mentioned several times
The digital stuff.
to assist with communication. And also thinking about the magic mirror, and I don't know where that was coming from for the donor wall.
We'll cover that in resource development.
Okay, but was that an expenditure that the school was,
Well, no, let me do that in resource development. So,
okay,
because
but I guess I was,
conceptually, you're right.
but I guess I was thinking that there are other ways to do that are less expensive. Because I do think we tend to be at the champagne level for a lot of stuff. And it's nice to have nice.
We're a school, if you could say Cadillac or Porsche.
Cadillac, Porsche, Rolls Royce. I mean, because that was not a low-end mural wall. So I'm just like, why would they just try to get something so super fancy that a hospital can afford, not a little school? Well, but anyway, the bigger thing is that I don't think we're maximizing some other ways to communicate and promote, especially when that was a repeated challenge that some prospective board members, there was layers of, not layers, but there was common threads that they mentioned. Communication is one of those things.
I think that's a perfect item. That this is where I just, watching these two committees between finance and resource development has taught me a lot this year, is that we have got to do a better job planning and having a consistent view of priorities, because otherwise it's just the flavor of the day of who wants something and who, honestly, there's confusion on who. Some people think, or some groups think they have the right to make decisions around budget, and they really don't. So we gotta be clear on, there's a priority list. We've got to do some bottoms-up budget building for programs, clubs, athletics, whatever the school needs. There's got to be a bottoms-up budget analysis done, and then you make that request into the system as part of our strategic planning. And then as we start off next year, we should understand what money is getting allocated to what programs going into the year. Nobody should go into the year not knowing how much money is going to be allocated to their programs.
Or the reality that this is the third academy data report that mentioned professional development and needing professional development to move the needle. So I think that always has to be weighed against all the other stuff we can do, because if you don't have well-trained teachers, none of it, we're not going to be able to get to anything else.
I think that will be the key in the strategic plan, that when you look at your, what I call your levels of detail, as they go down and get into the kind of the weeds of what does it go take to take action on the items. One of the things we talked about in finance is they have to come back with a cost projection of what's it going to cost to do those items. And we'll have to roll them up in a priority list and make some decisions as we set budget for next year by June 30th.
Rodney, under 4A, it says the finance committee shall review all proposals. Did you all adopt a new procedure or a policy, or is that what you all are?
So what we're saying is that the proposal for next year has to be done in the finance committee before we will allow the final budget to be presented in June.
Okay, and what do you mean by proposal?
So, for example, if as part of the strategic planning process under, say, the culture pillar, right? We've got excellence in academics, culture, and operations. You may want to say in culture, there is a request by administration to say, we would like to propose, $20,000 for a certain staff event. I'm just kind of making one up. We would look at that. They would bring the proposal to us, and we would say, will it fit within our current budget? It's just a check against the budget. And then if they say yes, then that can go on the list that comes to the board for approval as part of our next year's budget setting. What I don't want to happen this year is I don't want to bring a budget forward with no supporting detail of where
So
The money-
really,
It sounds like you're-
I mean, most organizations now are preparing budget requests.
It
for-
sounds like this should be a
fiscal year.
board policy, that all requests for expenditures must be run through the finance committee before being presented to the board for the following fiscal year. I think that's kind of what she's asking is.
Well, we do have
is
that
this-
now
is
in our
this
fiscal,
something-
yeah, in our fiscal operating
Does say that?
procedures, we do have that. Anything above, what did we say, we increased it last year, was it 2,000 or 5,000?
That's my authority to sign a contract, but if it's a non-existent budget line and we want to add a new budget line, it always has to go to finance before it can be approved. I don't have the authority to add a budget line.
That was more
I'll
of just a
spend money
clarity
until it
item
has
that we
been
all
pre-authorized.
reminded ourselves that any additional expenditures have to come through it, and they have to come through the academy leaders with Susan to sign off on them so that she's aware.
If I may, from my perspective as
Is that
the,
already a board level policy? Because if not, we should write it down and make it one.
Well, let's go back and look at those
Fiscal
fiscal
policies,
procedures, but I think it is in there.
as an administrator, what I'm hearing my board tell me is that in our efforts to be proactive as we get a strategic plan developed, that the board needs to be hearing in the February to April timeframe, anything we'd like to do differently with the budget, so that there's a discussion about it, a case discussion, et cetera, versus waiting until the fall and going, ooh, we've identified this really cool way we want to spend some money and we notice there's surplus, can we do it?
Yes, that's what we're saying.
So that, as an administrator, that's how I'm hearing this, and that's what
But-
that's how I prefer to operate as
I
well.
think what would help is a procedure on your end with your staff, that this is the deadline for you to talk about that, figure that out, and then present, so that then it can present to us.
That's right, and also that discussion too, Jimmy, was that we also want to see the ones that the institution is saying are not affordable within the budget. Because otherwise you end up with this backlog of things that we don't know about, so we don't know that if we got $8 million in our operating budget and we say, wow, we really denied $500,000 of requests from our institution, right now, we don't see any of those. They're just
what they are.
yeah, we could say, well, maybe we need to prioritize some additional resource development, or we need to make some hard trade-offs because we've been saying no to these items. So it's a window into the things we're saying no to. That was an aha moment.
Yeah,
And that should-
there are some things that I think we would say, how can we afford it?
That's right.
Not that we're broke. So, but we don't know that we would never even
That was-
consider those things.
With your example of the technology request, so that did not fit in within a specific line item?
Well, what it is one level does, one level doesn't. So there's an administrator level that we can get that fits within our already operating budget. The question we were debating is whether we got the souped up version that would allow the teachers to also have monitoring controls in the classrooms. And then the secondary debate was, do we spend money on that when we're not even sure they're trained on know how to use it and would actually be able to functionally use it, or would be technology that we purchased that wasn't going to be used?
I can't.
So we're going to move forward with getting the administrator level so that someone like Mr. Williams can keep control and get his alerts when students are doing things and let the teachers know, versus increasing that budget line to accommodate the more expensive version until we get a handle on technologies we already have in place and make sure that we're using them more effectively.
And that discussion, if it was
Well-
going in the next year, if you go with the souped up version, it's not affordable now.
I mean, what
you
is
bake it in
what is
next
the
year's
problem
budget.
that is driving the request?
Which request?
What is the problem that is driving the request for this software? What is the
We've
overwhelming
had-
problem
We've
that
had several safety incidents where students were allowed within a classroom setting to be able to get onto certain websites and to be able to carry on certain types of inappropriate behaviors because the teacher didn't have the monitoring device, but also we didn't have it at the administrative level tight enough. So the version that we'll pick up will be tight enough to where our technology director would get that and could have stopped it sooner.
I remember.
When they circumvent,
Is that what you do?
they circumvent the Wi-Fi. I don't even know how to explain it.
Well, I remember 5 years
By
ago.
using proxies
we
and so
actually-
forth,
we had
so
this- Yeah, we had this.
we just have to
exact
tighten
same
it down a
discussion.
little bit more.
We had this exact same discussion. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. In fact, I remember actually being part of a small team that evaluated some of the technology solutions to it. And at the time, we said no because when you actually look at how you administer that software, is the teacher has to go in there and build their lesson plan in the software so that the system knows, hey, during these times in my class, you can only go to these 5 websites. That's an example. And at that time, we couldn't figure out whether or not teachers had the diligence and the time to go do all that prep work as part of building their classroom curriculum and instruction for that day, that they would keep it up to date. It's not, we have a system in place that's free to us, that's it's called Zscaler, it's in the cloud. It does URL filtering, but there's a lot of ways you can get around those kinds of things. So this was just another layer on top of it. So we started having those discussions about, I understand the problem you're trying to solve for, but is that the best way to approach it? And well, from a cost perspective, the answer was,
And we all-
we're not going all in. We'll try it out with an administrator level, which fits within the existing budget for right now. We'll learn from it, and then we'll come back to another request.
Would that become a discipline issue?
Yeah.
It's multi-layered.
Some monitoring is get up and walk around your class.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the classrooms is having, it is actively monitored, so that's what added to the layer of conundrum.
But there's also just so much control.
Right.
And you can't keep just trying to think you're gonna buy, bigger mousetrap. There's only so much control in this world with technology.
Well, especially
And-
today,
and
when
we
they can turn on a
are,
hotspot on their phone and they can link a computer to a phone.
yeah, we're probably very far behind all the things that students can do to get around things. So I'm wondering how much real money we're gonna put in as opposed to a different kind of intervention or discipline where it becomes painful that if they do that.
So that's where that one stood. We had a discussion about an HR proposal. We'll cover that under new business. I think Susan will bring that up in new business. So the last thing I just see for the Finance Committee update, sorry for a long one, but we're trying to be a little bit more detailed as the results of those committees, is we do need to approve the budget on a monthly basis. It's in the board packet. The major changes will be next month when we factor in the bonus payout as well as the facilities changes that we'll approve tonight. So as is, just ask for a motion to approve the budget that's in there that still shows the $198,000 in surplus.
And I will draw your attention to the fact that the summer reading camp monies for this current summer have already been deposited. So if you see that as a relatively large number, that's been preemptively deposited so that we can access that for the coming summer.
So moved.
Okay.
That's
Do it. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. Right into resource.
So also in your packet, you will have the resource development minutes. A couple of things from that meeting, which kind of tied back into the Finance Committee meeting, is we are in the process of doing the recognition for our corporate sponsors on our public Facebook page. I think we're almost through with all of those. There may just be a couple left, so if you see those, please take a minute to make a comment.
Rodney, were we never able to compile a list of our sponsors?
I'm doing the best I can. We've got a list of them with the contact methods and who they are. Do you want it in email? Do you want it in phone? That's an action item that's not voted.
Okay.
So, no. What we've been doing right now is just trying to stay fresh on it with the people. Is actually just getting it out to them. As what we had committed to doing was doing some social media promotion for half the recognition. But we will get yours.
Okay.
That's good. All right.
Well, I think just instead of dumping it all at one time, I do commend them for just kind of arbitrarily putting one sponsor, I hate to say a day, or, just.
No, I like that. I just simply, what's
I was not aware of
appropriate is
it.
to send a thank you letter, I think. So I was just trying to help out with that.
Oh, no, I appreciate you.
As well for future marketing, because you then create a database of sponsorships with the contact name, telephone, address, email.
Let's just say this was the first year we kind of put some emphasis on really going after sponsors, and we realized we really don't have a good database of who are the people we do business with, who are the contacts, literally like, Amanda and I were randomly calling people at Sonatrol to figure out who's the person that didn't say yes kind of thing. So yes, we've got to improve that for next year. Again, back into our strategic plan, when we look at resource development and we look at the gap that we have in needs versus wants versus affordability, we've got to have that hard discussion about if that number is big enough, we're going to have to invest in some. It is a lot more work.
I agree. I had somebody come up after the rifle and said, Chris, I thought you were going to get up with me about sponsorship love. I'm like, you can still make that donation. I mean, but then also it's an arduous task and for volunteers. And so, we all get busy in our own jobs, and then lo and behold, you get a phone call after the event, and somebody could have given us $1,000. So,
And when you are referring to sponsors, are you talking about sponsors across the school or just for the raffle?
It was just for Rivers Raffle sponsors.
it was just a raffle, but if there's any way that we can work with our booster club and go back and look at who has sponsored in the past, because I can tell you there's some families that would probably consider whose children have graduated that it would be willing to.
Well, we had some first-time sponsors this year too. We increased our sponsorship substantially, so we want to hit them again next year too.
Yeah. So, again, every year we're getting better. I mean, and so I think we ended up with somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 sponsors. So just to let you know, that's ongoing. I still owe the board that kind of final financial tally of the net of where we landed, but all in all, we're closing that one out. So in the Resource Development Committee, one of the things that you have to do, we learned this year, is sometimes you have to get into the bowels of operations of how things work right now to understand, so that then you can kind of take a step back to improve it. The first kind of tiptoe into that for resource development this year was around trying to streamline and align fundraising strategies, because it's all over the place. There's literally seems like 10 or 15 going on. People don't know which one you're. So we had put some procedures in place with administration about having fundraising requests come to the Resource Development Committee. I think we said in the policy or in the procedural document, it was like 60 days in advance. And through putting a little more scrutiny on those things, we learned some things about who gets incentivized. Are we clear where the money's going to go? So we are going to, as a Resource Development Committee, what we've decided is by the end of this year, we will have guidelines for next year, and we will also have an inventory of any activity for next year. By the end of this year, or at a minimum by the middle point of the summer, any activities that are going to go on next year that are related to fundraising. Because we have to get in front of this thing. It can't be, oh, I just don't have any money, I'm just going to go to the fundraiser. There's got to be some oversight to that. And that came kind of to a head, if you will, when there was discussion about fundraisers that groups wanted to hold to offset the cost of summer camps for athletics. And so there was a proposal brought to the Resource Committee about getting these fundraisers approved for summer camp. And when we looked at them, we said, really, that's not a resource development action item. So that got sent back to Ms. Pulliam to go work back with the athletic director on a better framework for those camps, because we started getting into all kinds of questions around what's the liability, what's the waivers that need to be signed, et cetera. So that action item went back to Ms. Pulliam to come up with some guidelines and come back to the Resource Development Committee around that. And then lastly, the Resource Development Committee wants to build a plan for next year based on the strategic priority ask from the school administration, linked to the strategic plan for next year more proactively by the end of the year. Because we can't be halfway through the year and randomly coming up and saying, oh my, we got to raise money for this or we got to raise money for that. You can't plan that way. There's no action out there. I just wanted to give you an update of how that committee has evolved and started to understand how things are working today with an eye towards improving it for next year. And then lastly, to your point, Donna, about the donor wall. So one of the other things I've learned is when we talk about things in committees, sometimes we talk about things as exploratory efforts to understand first. Being a very close-knit community, sometimes people hear about those things and they think it's further along than it really is, and so it creates a bit of angst among some people. But this theory of the donor wall was we had a specific scenario where we had a particular donor that was willing to donate somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000, and they were just simply asking about what would be some sponsorship visibility opportunities on campus. They specifically had some interest in kind of these high traffic areas, which naturally were here now present. So that's when we had a discussion as a committee about, well, if we kind of use part of that coming into the gym, that front wall, as a bit of a recognition wall, we just did some exploratory work. So what would the cost even be, right? What would it even look like? So we got some preliminary proposals, like one of them's from the magic mirror thing. And again, it's just an exploratory thing, and that's some of the things we got to get better at around here is we can go do exploratory work, but the decisions would lie with the executive director and the board. So no decisions were made. So every time you hear something doesn't mean the decision was made. It was just exploratory work. There was a request, it come back around, I think it was around $2,800 was the projected cost of the format. And we had some dialogue about, well, what about the trophy case, if they're gonna put that there, because it is the gym, and if we could make that work with, so that's kind of an iterative process. There's no recommendations coming forward to actually do it right now, but we do need to start thinking about, in this scenario where we've got people that want to donate that kind of money, what are we going to do from a donor recognition perspective? I've been on this discussion for a lot, guys and ladies. Like, if we sit around and listen to everybody's opinion on everything, we'll never do anything.
Well, we've had this discussion on just this campus of naming buildings, naming classrooms, naming whatever. I mean, and we've never really, I remember just arbitrarily doing something on a GoFundMe page, just, and I definitely got ahead of my skis, but yeah, I was trying to see if we could raise any money, about, or classrooms, $10,000, is this atrium here 50, and is this building?
So what I'd like to see is between now and the end of the year, we get some more documented framework around what is fundraising as part of resource development, meaning in each charter school, who is allowed to do it, under what conditions, with what approvals are needed, just so we all go into next year from the same sheet of music, because it was literally chaos this year. And people doing it in the best of intentions. Nobody's doing anything maliciously, it's just without guidance.
Well, we just need to make sure whatever we do decide, and that is it forever? Because all you have to do is look, in whatever gifts we accept, and whatever naming or whatever they're expecting, is this, how long does it stay? Because Carolina's going through this with the dean. I mean, you had people that bought lifetime rights to seats, and now they're trying to do something, and it's like, wait a minute, 20 years ago I gave you this, and so we just need to make sure that this is something that.
Yeah, so, and look, I'm a big believer, you gotta kind of start small and grow. Whatever what we were discussing was, at least in the first pass, one, you could easily remove it. Two, you fix your commitment to the donor by just doing it, say, we just do it for 1 year, at a maximum of, say, 2 years or 3 years, so that you clearly have points where you can just stop. You don't just leave it into some 20 or 30 year thing and all those complexities. So that was kind of where we're at around this concept of, because we did have a donor that's willing to give right now, potentially give us
Would they be
some.
willing to give to a digital wall where the information, you can run the donors commercials, you can put pictures, which are far more engaging than just somebody's name sketched on a piece of plexiglass. And it's probably about the same money, if not less. It can be controlled by Brad with the.
That's a good point. We'll take that one back. That's not what we're coming.
So I had a question just about general fundraising guidelines. And so, when I'm thinking about fundraising guidelines across the entire institution, when I think of fundraising, I think of book fair as a fundraiser, correct? Is Resource Development Committee the appropriate committee to oversee fundraisers across the entire institution?
So I think we have to be careful with the definition of oversee. So the administration of the fundraisers and the operational side of it, I don't think so. That really falls on administration. They got to oversee those things on a daily basis, right? Like who's doing what, where's the money going, who's taking it, how is it allocated, which part's in the budget, how are they tracking it, all that kind of stuff. But I do think from an oversight perspective, from an alignment perspective, there does need to be visibility to that. Now, Susan is there. I mean, Ms. Williams is there. She represents them all. She has to approve the ones that come, but you also have to remember Booster Club is in there too. So we're trying to do some joint and collaborative, because it was a sequencing thing. Right? It's like, what was Booster Club doing versus what was athletics doing versus what's all the other administrative stuff. So depending on oversee, depends how deep you're going on what is the definition of oversee.
Yeah.
We just simply approved it. The committee simply approves that this fundraiser is on the calendar, that all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. As far as the day-to-day administration of fundraising, we don't get into that.
I was just in my mind going through all the different fundraisers and my mind was just kind of going, you know, there's so many aspects of fundraising, and a lot of them do tie to curriculum. I don't know, it just seemed like, you know, when I think of resource development, I think of a committee to supplement our
That is where we
budget.
want to go. That is where we want to go, but to start with, given our money ready, we take over $250,000 in and out of the institution from our parents through fundraising and pass-through expenditures already.
Right.
So what we were hearing was people were saying, I'm tired of being asked for money over and over and over and over and over. That's where we started to talk about a committee is, okay, what are the kinds of activities we could recommend back to people that want to do them that are less intensive on our parents? Mud cats is a perfect example.
Yeah.
If people wanted to go, they wanted to have a day out, they go. Or maybe we give guidance under certain activities. If you're going to raise money, you can do it, but you have to go off campus to do it. You want to go host a, I don't know, William's example is you go to a state football game and you man one of the booths and they pay you some. That's not on the back of our parents, so.
Yeah, no, I
it was a
definitely
bit of that.
want the big strategic plan. I was just, as I started thinking about it, I was like, a strategic, I mean, it's resource development where that should be.
We talked about that a little bit at the last meeting and said that the goal would be to pull that off of the committee over time, but until the committee fully understands what all is happening on campus, it makes it difficult for them to make proposals. So we're working to streamline that process. In addition, we're talking as an administrative team that these shouldn't be coming the way that they're coming. There should be a little, just like our budget case stuff that we should be presenting to you in the February to April time period, anything that we'd like to adjust in the future year's budget. We should be getting all of these requests, even if it's not the specific date, but the tenor of it and the concept of it, we should be getting these before school even starts, or at least before a semester starts. So we're gonna work on our internal processes to make sure that all those requests are coming in a more timely fashion so that we have time to talk with everybody about how it all lays out and how it fits with field trip schedules, how it fits with music concerts, how it fits with everything else, because
So field trips would be something that, especially the ones that then they say they have to.
correct, because if, correct.
I mean, that's
Right.
another example.
So that way those are all laid out ahead of time so we know where everything's hitting and fitting, and then we can have those larger conversations about where
And so.
we need to focus on a service project over.
Next February, or what are we doing?
No, those will be processes we're gonna put in place before the start of the next school year for us, for our internal operations, as far as resource development and coming up with a campaign type
The
thing.
goal is
That's-
we're looking
that's
to
done.
have at least a handle on learning from this year. All the things that came through the committee was an eye-opening experience for a lot of people, I think, and also the diligence in how to run. Learning from that, we should have some guidelines, hopefully by the end of the year, probably a little bit in the summer once we get out of school. But then when school starts next year, the plan for the whole year's worth of activities should all be documented. There is no reason, there may be one or two one-offs, but it shouldn't be, because most of the stuff we do here is year over year over year. So we should be much more planful about those things. And some of those discussions back linked to the strategic plan may be, we say, no, you can't fundraise for certain things. And, you know, really some of the purposes of some of the fundraisers to help some outside entities. I've been openly vocal about this, like we should show up with our time and our effort and our people and be visible in the community versus just raising money and handing money to another organization. I mean, Special Olympics or Miracle League or one to help clean up Smithfield. I mean, I think we need to think differently about what does helping the community mean, and it doesn't mean just raising money off the backs of our parents or people and then giving the money to somebody else, always. Sorry for the long winded, but that's a dump of kind of where we're at with these committees and how we're really thinking about for next year.
Well, I think that's good work, and we should be really carefully reviewing those things and tightening up our procedures as we move forward. Academic affairs, I don't want you to keep talking, you kind of, but we had a meeting, yesterday, although I was only there for the, oh yes, Nicole, do you want to give an update?
I hope you can.
Well, so we continue to work on providing some details for the excellence in academics component of Ms. Pulliam's strategic plan. Some suggestions, some framework that might be helpful for Susan to consider as she fills in the details of her strategic plan. So it had to do with developing a possible statement about what exactly does excellence in academics mean, what are the major categories under that particular grouping, like teacher, professional development, instructional design, and things of that nature. So I think we've done some good work over the last 2 meetings with some good suggestions, and I know that's been shared with Ms. Pulliam, and she'll be taking that and using it to further develop her strategic plan. And then,
Yeah, well, we did talk about freshman seminar.
oh, the freshman and senior seminar and was presented, the internal courses. And so one of the things that I had a question on, you gave me the syllabus. So if you're requiring it 8th and 9th graders, when they take it in 8th grade, then why 8th and 9th graders? Why just not 9th graders?
I believe the discussion was if we could shift some of the elements to 8th grade so that we didn't have to have them in 9th grade, or even move it to an 8th grade course, is a conversation that the 2 academies are having. Is it properly located in the 9th grade when the idea of it is to prepare the students for the senior academy courses? So there's been a lot of internal conversation about whether or not the course actually belongs in the 8th grade.
Okay. Board development?
Okay, we had the board interviews on Saturday, April the 13th. Our interview panel, I'm going to list off anybody, myself, Dawn Dixon, Susan Pulliam, Beth Miller, who was a teacher here, Chris Kaiser, who was a teacher, Jason Cummings, and a community member, John Faulkner. We had 4 applicants, and we interviewed all 4 of those. Of those 4, there were 2 that really stood out that we thought would be a great asset to the board based on our current needs right now. Of the other 2, we felt like at some point that may be a good idea to reach out to those other 2 individuals to serve on committees if they were interested. They had some really good skill sets, but of the 4, there were 2 that really we felt like were best suited for the board's work at this time. Based on the bylaws, the nominating committee is to present those slate of nominees to the board at this meeting in April for approval to be voted on at our May board meeting. The 2 nominees that the nominating committee are recommending for approval are Jane Jackson and Benji Woodard. The remaining other 2 candidates for applicants were Shannon Ferguson and Jeff Caldwell. But again, the 2 that the nominating committee is recommending are Jane Jackson and Benji Woodard.
Okay, thank you.
For clarification, do you also at this time need to bring forth whichever members would be continuing into next year? Because I believe everyone's term expires at the end of this term.
I think we already did that.
You already did that, okay. Just verifying.
So at this point, we need to accept the slate. It will sit for 1 month, and the members will be voted in at the May meeting.
That is correct.
So I'll entertain a motion to accept the slate.
So moved. I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion?
Just one question. How many board members would that yield if those 2 are approved for next year?
Okay, just a second. I think it's 8. I think that's right.
Any additional questions?
Yes, it would be 8.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. Okay, we'll move along to old business.
Oh, Dawn, one other thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. According to the bylaws, we're to do board training in June for the new members. So if anyone has topic areas that they think need to be brought up, I don't have a plan yet as to how the training will go, what's going to be in the training, so if anyone has suggestions, just send me an email.
I do. I have a couple of board training sites that are very comprehensive that I really would like to move to Canvas. I'm really going to try to carve out time to get that together and have you come over and do a light board video at JCC, a little welcome. So we put it in the course.
How much are these light board videos?
That's free.
And if we bought, I mean,
Oh, you cannot buy it because my engineering students built it for my faculty.
It's an open source, so
Okay.
you can get the instructions for building it. Build it, that's what we did. You would love it too, though.
I know, that's just curious.
For your, yeah. Okay, so now we're on to.
Old business.
Maybe you could do a piece of the founding, the historical perspective.
See, I'm getting the whole storyboard in my head.
They typically do that, but I don't have to.
Oh, you're the one that has the video experience. No, you forgot, I saw that. Yeah. Okay, any old business?
Oh, I have a question, maybe it's related to old business. So I know we sort of eliminated the facilities committee as a regular committee that meets every month. And it does seem that a lot of the facility issues are handled through finance, even though they're not specifically called on necessarily to. So if I was aware of a broken window or a light that was out, would I contact the finance committee?
Goes to Josh.
Susan, I
Okay.
heard this.
Robbie is our sort of ad hoc chair for facilities, so as a board member, he would be your board contact, but myself or Josh would be happy to be your staff contact.
Okay, thank you.
Any other items? Any
Items for old business? Any items under new business?
Yes, as was mentioned in finance, staff would like to bring forward a consulting contract for HR Solutions. The company's name is UpLevel. Ms. Heifel and I interviewed two separate companies to try to identify a company that can help us in our excellence in operations in doing an audit of our HR practices and policies and procedures, and then give us some ongoing consultant advice related to matters of HR. As you can imagine, being a single site location with over 90 employees, we want to make sure we get this right. We're not going to be able to develop a strong culture and have strong operations if we're missing some factors in our, while we think we're fantastic and we're doing a really, really good job, we are a little bit out of our depth on certain issues, and we think it'd be really good to have someone else come in and look at our policies, look at our procedures, look at our files, and give us any advice about how we can improve those processes and procedures for our staff so that they can have a better experience. Am I missing anything, Ms. Heifel? Because you're more familiar with the actual.
And we do an initial audit, and then we have a line, basically like a retainer for hourly services throughout the month, so we repurchase.
Was there a general projected value for the initial?
The initial
Audit.
audit would be somewhere between $500 and $600.
So somewhere between $500 and $600 for the initial audit, and then you can see the regular hourly rates that are listed on page 3 of the fee schedule.
And you
Are
just
you-
buy 5-hour blocks and use them going forward as
Yes.
you need them for review and maintenance and stuff. That makes sense.
So if you're looking at personnel files, do teachers have to somehow okay that?
They would be under a confidentiality agreement with us, understanding that they're operating as our agent, similar to other contracts that we have with vendors that provide services to our EC students. So within the contract that's assigned, all of the confidentialities are included in it so that they know they can't speak about our staff records outside of us because they're acting as an agent of the school. Similar to our attorney, similar to anyone else.
Similar to our end-of-year audit, and Reeves comes, they have to pull so many of our HR files and do audits on that, so it's the same kind of confidentiality agreement.
Are you alerting them that someone will be reviewing perhaps their personnel file?
Certain files are public record by definition anyway.
They know.
I'm giving you at any time with the signature page. Other ones are confidential, they wouldn't be looking at those.
Correct.
Well, I mean, certain things, you can't just walk in and ask for someone's personnel file.
It's public record, not the confidential files, those are two separate items.
And what's the difference, what's in the confidential file? So if they had a disciplinary action or some health information, because they're FMLA or whatever?
Any FMLA, workman's comp, their health insurance information, their background check, their social security numbers, all of those fall under a confidential file, but separate from their employment file.
And so they are looking at their employment
Employment
file.
file, correct. We also have an I-9 calendar that has to be totally separate from the other two files, which also has copies of your driver's license, social security card, passport, that information, completely separate from both of those files. And that's by federal law, that'll be all separate.
And so you're saying.
And it would be an audit, so they wouldn't be looking at every single
But
employee.
you would not, you're saying you weren't thinking you were gonna tell your staff?
We don't alert them when the auditor
Huh?
comes in and selects files.
So
It's a
what,
standard business practice, but we certainly can let them know that we're going to have an HR audit and that files will be reviewed to help us improve our practices, but it's not to look at anything about the individual employees, it's to make sure that we have the appropriate documents and the appropriate files.
Well, that's fine, but also, I mean, I don't know, I seem to be different because you all
Okay.
seem like some stuff doesn't need to be told. I mean, what's the harm in letting your institution
Oh, there's no
know
harm,
that
well,
this?
I mean, we're letting the whole world know, but certainly we can, in our approved documents, let them know that an HR audit has been approved and that as part of the
Well,
audit, they'll be looking at our files.
Okay,
Not-
I think we need to work on communication and transparency in what's happening at the, you know, to me,
That's fine.
with your staffing.
Okay, understood?
I'm a little bit not clear as far as what we're considering confidential and what is public as far as the personnel files, because there's a state statute that dictates what is.
So in their employee files would be their licensure, would house their resume, their application, job descriptions, their employment agreement, their, trying to go through the file, handbook agreement, conflict of interest statement, and it does include any kind of disciplinary action that has to go on their employment file. But that's-
Is there salary on their contract?
It is.
And what are we using to make that determination as to what is included? In the
And what-
personnel
what-
files, what's open to public inspection?
Oh, that's been based upon the employment law that I known in the past, unless there's something changed that I'm aware of.
Are we looking at?
We're happy to prepare a,
Yeah, that would be good. I just want to make,
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's 126-23 is the statute. The public, what it would be considered to be public
Right.
personnel file.
right.
Are we needing to vote on this tonight to approve it?
What's the contract?
I think this is part of the consultancy would actually be.
Helping us make sure that-
Just describe.
Well, yeah, I'm just, but the conversation brought up that, raised that concern.
Which is
Isn't
the
all
main
that
reason.
covered in what they're, in the consultant agreement? I mean, they say that they won't do anything that violates any state or federal laws. They say that there's all this confidentiality of client materials kind of stuff. I mean, isn't that sort of part of the
Yeah.
agreement in the first place?
Well,
And part of what we're looking for in the audit.
It raised the comments raised a concern outside of
Well,
the agreement.
and if I can, this type of conversation is exactly why we'd like to have an outside firm consult with us to help us clarify anything that might be unclear and to give us
Do they have,
guidance,
do we know?
to make sure we are adhering to all state and federal laws.
What experience they have with other education institutions or what other education institutions?
For this particular company, we don't.
We did talk about that.
We discussed that she's got other clients, but I don't have to listen from there, sorry.
But they had other education institutions?
Yes,
Yes. I believe it's charter and private.
yes. And other nonprofits, she knows, she's familiar with nonprofit and educational institutions, but
We can certainly let this sit until May and bring you additional information to help make a better decision. The sooner we get it approved, the sooner we can get the audit started, but
So as I looked at it, and we talked about it through the financial
There's not a
meeting,
rush.
fiscal affordability was that it's not very expensive, at least for the initial assessment over the policies and procedures related to what they're looking at to start the dialogue. It seems like the question has really come up about, them looking at a individual employee's file. I mean, do you know that that's required? That
They'd only select
Why
five.
can't you just say, what material do you have in this set of files? What material do you have in that set of files? not actually look at an individual, but you can ask, this is kind of, I've got these files, I've got this kind of information, not about an individual, but this is what we stored. And they can give us feedback that says, yeah, that's appropriate in those files, or that's appropriate, or you've got gaps in these files. That's how I interpret it from the proposal. It's not about them looking into an individual employee file. Is that?
She was going to, but we can certainly do that.
She's got to pull a couple to find out.
It's different between an audit and a consultative service around how you do
No,
something. That's two different things.
I mean,
right?
she would say, let me see what your standard employment contract looks like.
Right,
Let me
exactly.
see what your standard offer letter looks like, without going into.
Give me a fictitious example of an employee file with this kind of, what would
Give me
you
a
put
list of
in?
everything you collect from an employee.
That's right.
There's no way consulting an audit.
That's exactly what that was. It's a consulting.
Not to throw this off on Michelle, but I am. I was not approving it with the understanding that Michelle blesses it.
Oh, well, no, that's a board blessing, not a Michelle blessing.
Well, we can sit here and discuss this all night, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you're the legal mind that sits there and says, I think this is okay.
Did you see anything
Answers
that-
whatever questions, concerns that you have.
Well, no, my concern was not so much with the agreement, it was just the comments it raised, just some concern for me as to what would be.
But that's
What we were
a
agreeing
separate
on.
discussion.
Right, and that's what I'm telling you.
Can we do this in the least invasive way possible for an employee?
So I think we should improve it with the content that it's not, they are not to look into individual employee files.
Well, I think we
Until
need
further
to,
discussion offline about the legalities of what is in the files and who can see it.
yeah.
Which that's the question. I mean, that's your concern.
Or that could be our first
But my
question.
concern's not so much with the contract
No,
itself,
no,
yeah.
your concern is what is in which files
Right,
and
right,
who
right.
has access to the information within them. But that's a separate set of discussion.
Going back to the contract itself, in my attorney-client agreement, I say in my agreement that I reserve the right to hire independent contractors, experts, whatever, to look at your confidential information. So do we have, so it's not a problem. I can share confidential information because those folks are going to keep it confidential. Do we have something similar where, in our employment agreement or anything along those lines?
That's what I was asking. I mean, I just think a normal teacher here would not think that somebody could go and just randomly, whether you contract with them or not, unless that has always been
Can our
an
files be
understanding.
audited anyway by the state?
Yeah. And it's also kind of similar
We never had this. We're not,
if Amanda.
we're choosing to do this.
If we would to hire an assistant for Amanda, that person would be privy to all that stuff. And that wouldn't be breaching a confidentiality. I'm just kind of thinking out loud about
And
it.
I just look at this as a third-party contractor that's held to the same standards.
Yeah, and I don't see a big problem without them working
I'm
at
sure
that.
there's people that are looking at my files all the time under confidentiality agreements with institutions.
As long as they're not distributing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we hired an assistant for her,
Would that be an employee?
and these people are employees.
Or you could contract out HR services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exact same thing, there's an HR contract.
Like we could be contracting our payroll or,
And it differs.
Well, we did.
oh, we do.
I mean, yeah. Okay, it was, what's
That's it.
what's
That's a good
the
point.
difference?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with this and them looking at anything. Do you, Michelle?
No, I don't have a problem with the contract itself.
She's sidetracked.
Yeah, it was just some of the information, sort of what are we maintaining and how is it
Yeah.
maintained.
But that should come out as part of the consulting.
Right, and
Make
I'm
sure that
not-
whatever
and I don't-
we do is adherent to whatever laws and procedures are recommended.
So, well, what is this difference in pay?
What Katie is our
I mean, from
our fiscal fiduciary.
They don't provide any guidance to us related to HR policies and procedures, simply,
When we first started,
Everybody makes.
Yeah, that's because paychecks, that's anybody that gets money from the school. The paychecks go through them. So
Right, so they know what everybody makes, which is the exact kind of information that you're worried
But
about
that's-
getting out.
but that's-
My main thing is, that this has never happened before. We've never expressed any, that I think employees should just be notified that we're embarking on this new. Really don't have a problem with that. I just think that some people might raise their, especially if in the non-confidential part, they have disciplinary things, they have other things in there that they may feel something about that.
I think discipline.
But I mean, not that they would do anything.
Discipline is public record.
So what you're saying is you'll approve it as long as there's an agreement that we
Until
proactive
somebody looks
notification.
at it. And I think the equity meeting yesterday can explain that. So it's fine until somebody sees it, and then it's not fine, so.
I think it's a great idea to communicate it as long as the staff realizes we're not auditing you, we're auditing our processes. I think it's always a good idea to communicate.
Yes, and I agree.
All right.
I make a motion to approve the consulting agreement as presented by Ms. Boyd.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Are we adding to the motion that we're going to communicate it to staff?
I don't think so.
Our normal protocol is to let them
Yeah.
know things that are approved, so we'll just make sure that we're clear what the approval entails.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. And I'll entertain a motion for close, was there other new business items?
I'm happy.
Okay, then,
Staff does have some personnel items for closed session if
Do we need
to be
a closed
before the
session?
board. Personnel items, yes.
there are personnel items, so,
A motion for closed session?
for personnel administrative discussion.
I second that.
Per NCGS 143-318.11A6.
And three?
No dissent.
I gotta remember.
Thank you.
Read it all there.
Okay.